We've been starting the book of Isaiah a few weeks ago, and as you recall, his ministry started about 740 BC, went to about 700 BC. He witnessed the fall of the northern kingdom of Israel in 722. He saw the death of several of its leaders. And in the midst of all of this, in the midst of all this decline of the nations, and these kings, this leadership that never quite measured up to what they were supposed to be, who were always a disappointment on some level, even the ones that were considered good in the eyes of the Lord. He called, when you look at chapter 10, he called one of the worst nations ever, the nation of Assyria, as an instrument of his judgment against his rebellious sons, Israel and Judah. And when you look at the history, when you even see some of the reliefs and some of the depictions of the Assyrian military, they commit all kinds of atrocities against the people. Wherever they go, they are a plague. And they're atrocities much like we have seen just recently. So many of them done to the northern kingdom of Israel, but even the parts of the southern kingdom was affected as well. And it was so bad, they were so bad in how they treated people, how they tortured and killed and mutilated people, that when the prophet Jonah was called by God to go to their capital city of Nineveh and preach repentance, what was his response? Did he want to go to give these people even a chance to repent? No, because they were so bad. He was afraid that God might actually show them mercy if they heard about repentance. And he would rather go in the opposite direction. He would rather be swallowed, by this ocean creature than give them the chance to repent. That's how bad it was. But as always, in the midst of this great decline, of this judgment and suffering, there is always hope for the future. Even for the scattered northern kingdom, he gives them this hope. In chapter 10, verse 20, he says, "Yet it will come about in that day that the remnant of Israel, those of the house of Jacob who escaped, will never again depend on the one who struck them down." They had actually called and asked for Assyria's help at one point. "But will depend upon Adonai, the Holy One of Israel, in truth." It says, "A remnant will return, even the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God." See, the vision of the return comes in the hope of the Messianic King and the future that he brings. This is the focal point of Isaiah's ministry and his writing. Chapter 11 really goes into more detail about this hope of the Messiah and the restoration of the Davidic King. This restoration starts once again a lot like what we talked about last week with Emmanuel, the child, where something small that seems harmless and helpless needs its time to grow. In Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1, it starts off like this: "Then a shoot will come forth out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch will bear fruit out of his roots." And there's some very interesting words in this passage, both in the Hebrew and even in the Greek translation, the Septuagint. The first one, the shoot, this rod, some of your translations will say, will come forth. The word rod is the same one used back in Exodus chapter 4 when Adonai, he's asking Moses what he held in his hand. Y'all remember that? And he said he had that staff, that rod, and when he threw that staff onto the ground, what would happen to it? It would become the serpent, right? So that's the same word that is right here. It's also used in Numbers chapter 17 about Aaron's staff, Aaron's rod that was placed before the Lord at the tabernacle. It's a word that is also used of kings, where they have a rod of iron or a royal scepter. It's the same word that's used of King Xerxes when he extends that to the Esther in order to show mercy to her. Y'all remember that when she appeared before him uninvited? It's a word when you look at the Greek translation of it, its word shows up several times in the New Testament, some important ones. Hebrews chapter 1 verse 8, he says, "But regarding the Son, he says, Your throne, O God, is forever and ever, and a scepter of uprightness is the scepter of your kingdom." That rod is what he is called. In Revelation 19, it says, "From his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down the nations, and he shall rule them with an iron rod, an iron scepter, and he treads the winepress of the furious wrath of Elohai Tzevaot, the Lord of hosts. And on his robe and on his thigh he has the name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords." This is this shoot. This is this staff or rod that carries with it the identity or the authority to rule. It's the sovereign, the kind that is held by the king. It goes on, then this shoot, this rod will come forth out of the stem, the geza, the root, which is sprout or offspring of Jesse, and a branch will bear fruit out of his roots. It's this idea of this offshoot. Giza is from a root word meaning to cut down. And so it's talking about a trunk or a stump, something that has been already cut down. And when you look at Jesse's line, the line of David has been cut off and left for dead. But in the future, there's going to be some kind of a new growth, a new progeny will come forth from that which appears to be dead. How many of y'all have ever done that, where you've cut a tree down and not before long you're going to have another one starting to grow back in the same place? And with this one, with olive trees in particular, sometimes these shoots will not necessarily be on the immediate trunk, but will shoot up from one of the roots, that's spread out along the ground. And it could even be some distance away from the original trunk, but genetically it's going to be the same tree. That's even how I would get some of the cuttings for the elderberry tree the trees that I've got in my yard. That's how I got those. They would shoot up from the roots elsewhere to start a new plant. But the ones that are a little distant from the trunk are often called by the next word in this sentence. So you've got the rod, you've got this geza of Jesse, and its branch, which is netzer. And in the Septuagint, it's translated as a blossom or a flower. This netzer, this blossom, this flower will bear fruit. Netzer is considered, the Hebrew, it's the Aramaic root of a town that's kind of important in the New Testament. Can y'all guess what it is? Nazareth. It's where a population of David's descendants relocated to escape some of the unwanted attention or threat from leadership in Jerusalem that didn't necessarily want David's line to come back. They moved further north up to the branch, Nazareth. But did they still know who they were, even all these centuries later? Did they still know that they were related to David? How do you know? When the time for the census, the time for the tax came, each one would have to return to their hometown. You have Joseph and Miriam, Joseph and Mary. They knew they had to return where? To Bethlehem, the city of David. They knew they were of that line even centuries after that line had been cut off. This blossom, this flower, is also used in Numbers chapter 17 to describe what happens to Aaron's staff, that rod that was laid before the Lord. What happened to it? It formed buds, it blossomed, and produced almonds, all in how long? Just one night, wasn't it? This beautiful or glorious blossom springs forth and makes, Jesse's cut off line fruitful again. This shoot, this kingly rod and scepter. He's not going to be like any ordinary king or ruler. This one will be anointed by the Ruach of God, the Ruach HaKodesh. He goes on in this verse in Isaiah, this shoot will come forth out of the stem of Jesse. This branch, this blossom will bear fruit out of his roots, and the Ruach of Adonai will rest upon him. The spirit of wisdom and insight, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of Adonai. This shoot of Jesse, this anointed one, this Mashiach, will receive the sevenfold manifestation of the spirit of Adonai. And the first is that the Spirit will rest upon him. Nuach is the word. To rest or settle down, to remain, to dwell. Right? It's not something that's just here today and gone tomorrow. The first time it's used is Genesis chapter 8, verse 4, this word where the ark came to rest on the mountains in the 7th month. It has this Greek word in the Septuagint, anapao, which means to cause or permit one to cease from any movement or labor in order to recover and collect their strength. To keep quiet or calm, this sense of patient expectation. That's when the Spirit is resting upon him. And in the New Testament, this word rest, nuah, or anapao, shows up in 1 Peter chapter 4, where the kind of rest that we receive when the Spirit blesses us. He says, if you are insulted for the name of Messiah, you are fortunate, for the Spirit of glory and of God would rest upon you. The Spirit rests on him, remains on him, strengthens him. And when we are insulted in his name, rests on us. But he rests on him not just for a moment, not just for an event, but for him to dwell in him, empower him to the task. John saw the Spirit descend upon Yeshua like this dove and rest upon him. Then John testified, I have seen the Ruach coming down like a dove out of heaven, and it remained, it rested, it dwelled upon him. Yeshua himself spoke of this when he quoted from Isaiah 61. It says, when the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him, he unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, the Ruach Adonai is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free the oppressed, and to proclaim the year of Adonai's favor. The Spirit resting on him is a fulfillment of that expectation. It's this root, resting on this root of Jesse is the first of these 7 qualities. The Ruach of Adonai will rest upon him, the spirit of wisdom and insight, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. It will rest on him. There's the spirit of wisdom, this insight, counsel. Wisdom is the word hakma. It's talking about an administration of shrewdness, prudence. It's also talking about a skill in war and battle. In the Septuagint, it uses the word Sophia for wisdom, which is a knowledge of very diverse matters, all things both human and divine. It's a knowledge of wisdom in the terms of of godly and upright living. When it's talking about insight, it's talking about understanding, discernment. Bina, the first time this word is used, is talking about Joseph, who has that wisdom, that discernment, that insight into the dreams of men like Pharaoh. In the Septuagint, it's the word synesis, which it means to from a set or to join together in someone's mind. And the first time that is used in the Septuagint is talking about Bezalel, where he's given wisdom and insight in how to make all of the furnishings for the tabernacle. As there's counsel, which is talking about advice or purpose. In the Septuagint, the word is from a verb using to exert the will or dispose towards something. And then fifth one thing is might or strength, talking about valor, talking about bravery and mighty deeds. It's from the Hebrew word for gibor. In the Septuagint, it uses the word about ability, force, strength, or power, and it's used in Mark 12 and Luke 10 to translate that idea that we've already said today, where you're supposed to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all of your might, your strength. That's what this same word is talking about. Knowledge is the word dahath, which is talking about perception, skill, discernment, or cunning. The first time that word is used is in reference to the tree of knowledge. It comes from the root word yada, which is to know. In the Septuagint, it's the word gnosis, which we see show up all the time in the New Testament. That act of knowing, that experiential knowledge, that moral awareness and wisdom. And then the seventh thing is the fear of Adonai, that reverence, that terror, that respect and awe, yirah. In the Septuagint, it uses a word that's talking about reverence and piety toward God, or godliness. And it's the same word used in the Septuagint for Proverbs 1:7, which talks about the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All those seven manifestations of the Spirit are on full display in the life, in the person, in the character of this ruler from Jesse. So much so that his every breath breathes in this Spirit, this breath. It directs his actions more than even the senses of sight and sound, what you see and what you hear. And there's a very interesting wordplay that goes on here. It says, the Ruach of Adonai will rest upon him, the spirit of wisdom and insight, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of Adonai. And the very next word, his delight is almost pronounced almost exactly the same way. The Reach, or something like it, will be the fear of Adonai. The Ruach of Adonai and his delight, Reach, will be in the fear of Adonai. Those two words are almost exactly the same. They sound almost exactly the same. The spirit and delight. And this word delight means to blow, to breathe, especially with the nostrils. Have y'all ever been around a horse before when they want to get close to something, when they want to figure out what it is? It kind of blows out first, and then it's allowed it to take in a bigger breath and get a better smell of what it is. So it's to breathe, especially with the nostrils like the horse, and it's translated most of the time in terms of smell, and it's to smell with pleasure, with joy. And its first use is Genesis chapter 8, after Noah has come out of the ark, when Adonai, he smells this pleasing aroma. Y'all remember that? His delight, his smell will be in the fear of the Lord, this pleasing aroma. You know, we have such good memories with so many smells, right? It's this pleasing aroma is not the smell of bread, baking at grandma's house. Y'all remember, how many of y'all can smell that right now? Right? Just by talking about it. Right? It's not going to be, hamburgers on the grill. It's not going out to the store, the candle store where they have all those different scents. Rather, what brings Messiah this great satisfaction is the fear of Adonai, fear that expresses itself in obedience to the Torah. If you truly hold him in awe and respect, if you truly know who he is and you understand him as king, then you obey his word. Fear that expresses itself in proper and godly sacrifice that you're supposed to bring to his altar, which is what our lives are supposed to be, right? Romans 12. I urge you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service, which is supposed to be a pleasing aroma to him. In fact, 2 Corinthians, he makes a similar statement. In chapter 2, he says, but thanks be to God, who in Messiah always leads us in triumphal procession, and through us reveals everywhere the aroma of the knowledge of himself. For we are the aroma of Messiah to God. He smells Messiah on us, among those who are being saved. Right? It likens back to that moment when Jacob appears before his father Isaac, and he's dressed up in whose clothes? Esau's. What does Isaac do? He pulls him in close, and he says, the smell of my son, right? He smells, apparently, Esau smelled pretty strong, but it was a very pleasing smell to him. That's what this is reference to, that when he pulls us close to him, he doesn't smell us. He smells Messiah. He smells that righteousness of Messiah. And since the Ruach empowers him with the fear of Adonai, Messiah is the one who recognizes it in others. Messiah breathes that in. He sees that in us, so that when we get to this point where he says his delight will be in the fear of Adonai, that he will not judge by what his eyes see, nor decide by what his ears hear. He's able to see through it all. As Messiah sits on the throne of David, when his subjects, when his people appear before him, he's not going to look at the outward appearances. He's not going to look at whether they're dressed really nice, whether they are rich or poor. He won't be swayed by their words or appeals or exaggerations or promises. He's not going to be like what happened with Joshua and the Israelites, who were deceived by the Gibeonites. Y'all remember that story in Joshua chapter 9, when they came and they dressed up in all of these worn out clothes and these sandals with holes in them. They came in with moldy bread. Right? Y'all remember that? To appeal to the people, to make a treaty with them. He's not going to fall for that kind of stuff. He's going to see through all of the fakeness that is out there, that we try to bring and hide who we really are. He's going to know and discern the thoughts of and intentions of our hearts, because he knows those who are his. And he will rule and make right judgments. His delight will be in the fear of Adonai. He will not judge by what his eyes see, nor decide by what his ears hear, but with righteousness. This king, this ruler, this rod of Jesse, with righteousness he will judge the poor and decide with fairness for the poor of the land. The ones that are typically the least represented, the least protected. He will strike the land with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. And also righteousness will be the belt around his loins, and faithfulness the belt around his waist. So no one will be treated with favoritism. No one's going to get special treatment. All will be held to the same standard of justice and righteousness. All will be held to the standard of, who do you say that I am? And even the land will be struck, and even the innocent blood will testify, and the wicked, the ones that thought they got away with everything, will be held accountable for all they have done with righteousness, with tzedek and emunah, faithfulness. Those two things hold, his robes, his kingly robes together, much like the belt of truth that is mentioned in Ephesians. And it reminds me of this from the book of Revelation, Revelation 19. He says, I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. The one riding on it is called Faithful and True. And he judges and makes war in righteousness. We saw in Isaiah chapter 2 a couple of weeks ago how the Messianic King, he turns all of the weapons of the nations into instruments for farming, right? Y'all remember that? How they will no longer be interested and able. They won't even know how to make war anymore. And we think that's an amazing thing, something to look forward to, and it is. But the peace that Messiah brings goes even way beyond that. Goes way beyond just people. He is the Prince of Peace to the extent that it extends even into the animal kingdom, even to creation itself. Verse 6, he says, the wolf will dwell with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the kid, the calf and the young lion and the yearling together. There'll be such peace. There'll be such lack of hostility that even a little child will be able to lead them. Can you imagine? I wouldn't try it today, right? You wouldn't want to let a little kid out into a zoo exhibit of some lions, would you? Anybody want to try that? I wouldn't want an adult to try that. The ones who have, it didn't typically end very well. Says the cow and the bear will graze, their young ones lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like an ox. Goes on, he says, a nursing child will play by a cobra's hole, and a weaned child will put his hand into a viper's den. You get the impression that those kind of things have happened in the past. In Isaiah's experience, you hear the stories of what happens. And it doesn't end well. But when Messiah is on the throne, there's no fear. It says, they will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, all my kingdom, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of Adonai as the waters covers the sea. All the things that we see as a result of the fall from Genesis 3 of Adam and Eve, that's all going to be undone. All that hostility, all the enmity, the kill or be killed, the eat or be eaten, the survival of the fittest, that's all going to come to an end under the rule of Jesse's offspring. And everyone will enjoy, everyone on the planet will enjoy his rule and enjoy his Torah. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of Adonai, with knowing him. And that should remind you of what the new covenant is supposed to be all about. We played that thing at the beginning about from Jeremiah 31. It says, this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days. It is a declaration of Adonai. I will put my law, my Torah within them. Yes, I will write it on their heart. I will be their God, and they will be my people. It says, no longer will each teach his neighbor or each his brother, saying, know Adonai, for they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. It is a declaration of Adonai. For I will forgive their iniquity, and their sin I will remember no more. They will all know me, from the least to the greatest. God's chosen people and people from every nation will be invited to live together in his kingdom and under his rule. That's what Isaiah goes on to talk about in verse 10. It says, it will also come about in that day that the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. The northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, and the nations, the Goyim, will seek for him, and his resting place will be glorious. This resting place, it's the same word in Psalm 23 that he uses for those quiet or restful waters, and it will be glorious. It will be kavod. We say, when we were talking about some of those blessings, we say, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Blessed be the name of his glorious kingdom. It will be glorious. That's what his kingdom is all about. That's what Isaiah doesn't want his people to ever lose sight of or ever forget, in spite of all the hardship and decline and suffering that they're seeing around them. He will stand as a banner, this nest where we get the Adonai Nisi, the Lord my banner. The word in Septuagint means to be chief, to lead, or to rule. The first to do something, the first to stand, the first to go forward. Romans 15 quotes this passage from the Septuagint. It says, and again Isaiah says, there shall be a shoot of Jesse, and the one who arises to rule the Gentiles, in him shall the Gentiles hope. He quotes this, among others, making the point that Jew and Gentile are supposed to be joining together under his rule. And it's not supposed to be something that waits for some far distant future kingdom. We're supposed to be coming together under his rule today, in our time, in our day and age. Because he goes on, he says, back a few verses, in verse 7, he goes back and he says, therefore accept one another, just as Messiah also accepted you. To what? To the glory, that glorious kingdom, to the glory of God. He says, for I declare that Messiah has become a servant to the circumcised for the sake of God's truth, to show that he is keeping his word in order to confirm the promises given to the patriarchs, and for the Gentiles. He has become a servant also to the Gentiles to glorify God for his mercy. That's extended even beyond. So as both Jew and Gentile are accepted by Messiah, so we should accept each other and join together against what? What should Jew and Gentile be coming together against? Well, we're coming together as one new man, but we're coming together against the darkness of this world, the evil and the atrocities of this world, because he promises to redeem and gather all his people under his rule, and he does that for wherever they are being scattered from. Isaiah goes on in verse 11, he says, it will also come about in that day that my Lord will again redeem, a second time with his hand, the remnant of his people who remain from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and the islands of the sea. His people are going to be found in more places than just Egypt. They're going to be oppressed and attacked in more places than just Egypt. And he is going to redeem a second time his people with his strong and mighty hand. It says, he will lift up a banner for the nations and assemble the dispersed of Israel and gather the scattered of Judah from the four corners of the earth. So there will be this second Exodus where his people are gathered. Yeshua himself says this at the coming of the Son of Man. This is what is going to be fulfilled in Mark chapter 13. He says, and then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. And then he will send out the angels and will gather together his chosen from the four winds, from the end of the earth to the end of heaven. If you haven't noticed by now, it's all connected. This is all one account of the redemption of his people. Everything about Yeshua is consistent with the expectation of Messiah, and even he points to this future fulfillment, to things that his first arrival left undone. And the hostility that Isaiah saw, even in his own day, all the suffering and the difficulty between Judah and Israel is undone. Because when they are fully united together in one kingdom, all enemies will be defeated, and all lost in captivity are returned. Just like this is talking about in Isaiah chapter 11, verse 13, he says, Ephraim's envy, the northern kingdom's envy of the southern kingdom will end. Those hostile to Judah will be cut off. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, and Judah will not harass Ephraim. Says they will swoop down on the Philistine slope to the west. So when they come together, they will plunder the children of the east, laying their hand on Edom and Moab, the children of Ammon obeying them. And then Adonai will dry up the gulf of the Egyptian sea. He will wave his hand over the river with his scorching wind, and will strike it into 7 streams, and let men walk over in sandals. And so there will be a highway for the remnant of his people who remain from Assyria, as there was for Israel in the day they came up out of the land of Egypt. There will be a highway that is prepared for the coming of Messiah. And that was same type of language is talked about in terms of John the Baptist, the one who came in the spirit and power of Elijah. In Isaiah chapter 40, he says, a voice cries out in the wilderness, prepare the way of Adonai, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. The way for the arrival of the Netzer, the branch of Jesse, has been made and prepared. And it's through Messiah that it is now possible that Jerusalem's iniquity can be removed, and all the earth, all the nations, both Jew and Gentile, can unite under the banner of this one who is the root of Jesse. And on that day, the mountain of Adonai, the kingdom of Messiah, it stands firm. It stands as the head of the mountains, and all the nations flow to it. And we will all be taught his ways, and we will all walk in his path. And so the Torah will go forth from Zion. It's the root of Jesse, Yeshua the Messiah. He is the one who accomplishes all of this, because the King is coming. Amen. The King is coming, and so we can all go up to the mountain of the Lord together.